Yeah, right. One of my John Oliver. Welcome, 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 welcome. Bob Lefsetz steals that for his podcast, so I might as well steal it for mine too. You know?
Did I ever tell you about the old school fuck up I did with Lefsetz
No.
and his email? He sends out the newsletter. That's where it started.
Yep.
And he used to talk a lot of shit about all the labels, and in particular, my brother, and somebody forwarded it to me.
Mm-hmm.
And in the old days with email, if somebody forwarded you an email, it didn't come up in line. Like it came up as like an attachment, and you had to click into the attachment to see the forwarded email. So I did that. So I clicked into Bob Lefsetz's email, and I thought I was reading it, and then I hit reply, and I thought I was replying to my buddy who had forwarded it to me, but apparently I was in the original email now, and I replied to Lefsetz and said, Lefsetz is an asshole.
That's funny.
And I sent it directly to him, and he's like, what did I do? And I was just like, thank God we have different last names.
Yeah, right.
I mean, probably he could have Googled and figured out, but he was talking mad shit about my brother, so I was like annoyed. And labels in general. Like, he blamed us all for the demise of the music business, but never had anything productive to say about how we should do it better.
Right. Yeah.
Just all the things that were fucked up, and how we're destroying the industry or something. So,
well, the one thing I do like about him is that he, he'll resend out in his email,
people talking shit, right?
Yeah, that disagree with him, which I think is pretty cool. You know what I mean?
No, and he's a good writer, and there's some interesting stuff there, but it seemed like, especially in the beginning. And I think my brother went and did a live interview with him or a podcast or whatever, and they did see eye to eye more. But it seemed like in the beginning, all his things were just negative. This label's fucking up this artist's career, and that label's screwing up the business in general. And it was just negative with no solutions, And I'm like, if you're going to say how screwed up somebody else is, then have a better way to do it. Like, 100%. Why aren't you doing it right then? Like, how did you become an expert to talk shit about everybody else? But what are you doing? What are you doing to fix the problem if it is in fact a problem?
Right. That's what my father used to always say: is critics don't create shit. So. Cool. Well, that's a sort of a good intro to hopefully what we're talking about today, which is the problems that go-go industry has sort of had for the last 40 years or so, and why nobody has really been able to fix it. So for everybody that's on Instagram, if you want to watch the both sides of this conversation, head on over to gogotix.co. and just click on watch on today's episode. Today we are talking with the illustrious Motti Shulman, my good friend. I was just figuring it out. Like, we've known each other for 18 years now. That makes
I was going to guess 20, but it's been a long time for sure.
Well, I think it may be 19. It just depends on because I was in Vegas. That's where we met in 2002, I think.
Weren't you in LA before that?
No, it was the other way around. Okay. And then came to LA. Yeah,
I got that. And I'm mixed up.
Yeah, but so it's been a long time that we've known each other. I appreciate you coming on. So why don't you give everybody your, just sort of a synopsis?
Quick CV. Sure.
Yeah.
Well, I just had my 15-year anniversary at Atlantic Records. They sent me an email, and I got a nice note from the chairman, and I got to pick, a watch or some pots and pans or whatever I wanted from this website for 15 years of service.
Yeah.
And that's kind of why I thought we would have been closer to 20 years, because I was definitely at Def Jam when we met. So I'm kind of going backwards here. And so 15 years at Atlantic, there was about a year off in between where I was doing independent stuff, and I was still on the Def Jam payroll for 7 months or so. And then I had a dozen years over 2 stints at Def Jam. But yeah, so it's been 16 years since I left Def Jam, which is crazy to me, but life moves on. I started actually in music, you know, like I think all of us, as just a fan. And my little brother stuck to his music lessons better than I did. I gave up when I was, I don't know, 4 or 5 years old, playing hot cross buns on the piano. And
the first thing I learned how to play on guitar too. That's like always the first song.
Yeah. So anyway, that was the end of my musician career at 5 years old. But my little brother kept playing, and you know, we were close in age, so we had a lot of the same friends, and we hung out a lot. And you know, we're always huge music fans, and had 2 older brothers who turned us on to different stuff, and my dad, who was a big jazz and classical fan, so we got, you know, some of that thrown in there.
And where was all this happening? Where did you
This was Los Angeles, California,
okay,
which is where I currently am. But that's, yeah, where we grew up. And, you know, as my brother got a little older, you know, went through a couple different instruments and ended up settling on bass guitar. But he was also a songwriter and put together some bands. And I managed his bands. That was my first thing, because he was kind of the spacey artist, you know, and I was the kind of more focused, analytical one. And my really big qualification was I turned 16, so I got my driver's license and could drive the family station wagon to gigs. So when he was 13 or 14 and had his early bands, I could book them gigs and, you know, drive them, pile all the drums and guitar amps and stuff in the back of the station wagon and get them there. So that was really my first stuff into music. And, you know, I did other stuff. I went to restaurant school in New York, kind of in the middle of doing music stuff. And one of the bands that my little brother played in that I managed for like 10 years, from the mid 80s to the mid 90s, kind of overlapped my first stint at Def Jam, was called Double D Knows. That was kind of contemporaries in LA of the early Red Hot Chili Peppers and Fishbone. And we did very well in LA. We, you know, not massive, but we sold out all the hottest clubs, the Roxy, the Whiskey, you know, some of the famous ones that a lot of the big rock bands, the Doors and Zeppelin, played at, and, you know, all these kind of cool things. I also figured out they were ripping us all off, that, you know, we'd bring 400 people into the show at $10 a head, plus they were making bar money and parking money and all that, and they'd pay us $250 at the end of the night, saying that, well, you know, there weren't that many people in your guest list, and we got to deduct for security and sound and this and that and the other. So I figured out that I could go to other clubs that weren't as trendy, or, you know, didn't have as many famous names. There's one called the Palomino out in North Hollywood that actually had some big name country acts who had played there, but they did a much better deal. They just split. We took the door, they took the bar. On weekends, we'd have to pay them the first 500 from the door. But we went from making, you know, $250 a night to making $3,000 a night, $3,500 a night. So, you know, I got a little lesson in that. And before I stepped into a label, you know, we were releasing our own recordings. I had a little independent stuff. So I learned, you know, just by doing A&R and publicity, and, you know, I did everything. I was a one-man band, you know, on the business side of things. But, you know, the band grew, and meanwhile, my older brother got involved in the hip hop world and opened the first hip hop club in LA. called the Mix Club. They had hip hop events like Uncle Jam's Army and Fresh Fest, did like a big festival once a year, but there was no, like every Friday night you could go to a hip hop club until my brother did it at the corner of Sunset and Western. And it started being really successful. We're talking early 80s, 82, 83. So I was just graduating high school and trying to figure out, wasn't making any money managing my little brother's band. I like food and wine and stuff. So I went to restaurant school in New York and lived with my brother, who had now given up the club. But while he was booking the club, he brought out Run DMC and Houdini, who were both managed by Russell Simmons, to the Mix Club in LA. So Russell offered him a gig in New York. He had moved to New York, and I wanted to go to restaurant school in New York. So he found us a place where we could all be roommates. So me and Leor and Russell were all roommates in the mid 80s while I was going to restaurant school. And the very beginning of Def Jam and Rush Management was going strong. They were managing all the biggest acts in hip hop. They had LL Cool J, Eric B. and Rakim, the Beastie Boys, Public Enemy, like on and on. Like they were on fire, as they were the preeminent hip hop management company. So I got to see a lot of that. Actually, like our first apartment was down in Soho and was a little teeny thing. We were sleeping on the floor, and then we got a sublet that had
that was before Soho was the really cool place to be, right?
It was starting to turn, but yeah, it was still on the fringe. But then we moved up closer to Gramercy Park, just north of the Village, and there was a big sublet that had a dance studio as half of it and an apartment as the other half. And it came with, because it was a sublet, it had furniture and all that stuff, which we didn't have. Like we were sleeping on futon mattresses on the floor, and we had a, AV system, but that was it. Like we didn't have furniture, we didn't have dishes, we didn't have anything. And all of a sudden we had everything. And we had an 8-line Rush Management office phone in our apartment because the dance studio became the Rush offices. So I got to see firsthand a lot of that, a lot of those artists coming through, and I got put on guest lists and got to go to the World and the Palladium and the after hours Save the Robots joints and like cool shows. I was broke. I was a student living in New York with no money, but I got on some cool lists, which New York is very much about. And then I came back to LA, and there was a lot of the kids in the band that I had been managing had gone off to college, so it was kind of put on hold, but that got rejuvenated and everybody graduated college. So now they're 22 and really hungry. And that's when we started selling out the clubs in LA, and we would tour and go to San Francisco and places along the way. And then we got accepted to do the new music seminar in New York. So I bought a van and, we booked gigs along the way. So I did a little bit of your booking agent stuff, just basically to pay for gas and, a little food. We get $50, $100, maybe $150 a gig, but that was enough to get us to the next town.
Right.
And my brother was living in New York, so we could stay there. And he had a big loft by this point, so it was big open space. So we did our.
What year was this? You think around?
This would have been probably 90, I think, something like that.
Okay, so Def Jam, the label, by this time was kicking. It was,
the label was happening, and he was making some money. Bought his first place. Wasn't roommates with Russell anymore. They could both afford their own places. And he actually had bought the old studio monitors from Chung King Studios, which recorded a bunch of the early historic hip hop stuff. and sold cocaine on the side, but you know, we won't talk about that so much. But my brother had these giant, like, you know, 4 foot, the big wall monitors from Chungking in his apartment. So we got smart and we said, we don't have to rent a whole system. And he has this giant loft. You know, we're the new kids at the new music seminar. So our show was at some shitty little club that wasn't, you know, on the A-list thing. So we did that show because we wanted to be part of the, you know, the promotion of the new music seminar. But then we did our own show at my brother's place where all we had to do was rent like a little like 12 channel board and plug into the Chungking system, which had these huge fucking monitors. And we sounded way better than we did at the club.
I bet.
And we invited everyone we knew and anybody we met at the thing. Then later on, we got accepted to do South by Southwest before that became a corporate, you know, clusterfuck. And we did a similar thing, you know, and toured to Texas and back. And again, yeah, meanwhile, my brother is moving up in the business. Rick Rubin decided to move to LA and, you know, turn Deaf American into a rock label because that was a big passion of his, and left Russell with Def Jam.
And that was Slayer and all that stuff, right?
Yeah, and the Four Horsemen and, you know, a few other things. So once Russell was kind of more wholly in charge of Def Jam, he brought my brother from the management company over to Def Jam to start running that, because that's kind of Russell's magic. Was he would start a company, have a great idea, and then bring somebody else in to run it so he could move on to his next idea.
Right.
So, you know, Rush Management became the biggest hip-hop management company, and he brought my first Andre Harrell, rest in peace, who just died this week. Actually, when my brother got to New York, his job had been given away to Andre Harrell. And he's like, what do you mean? Like, I sold my car, I gave up my apartment, I gave up everything to come to New York to be in the music business. And Russell felt bad, so he said he could be Run DMC's road manager. And, you know, he's like, God, I got a degree in international finance and marketing. Like, I'm going to be a road manager? But he believed in the hip-hop thing, and Russell, to his credit, did tell him that he could get a piece of anything he brought in. So if he brought any deals to the table, he got some of them. And my brother's first mission was he saw Run DMC walking around in shell-toe Adidas tracksuits, all Adidas all the time. They had a song called My Adidas before they got an endorsement from Adidas. So my brother's like, no way, this multinational billion-dollar corporation is not paying my artist to do it. So they did a special line of Run DMC shell toes with little elastics in them, so you didn't have to wear laces, and did all that. And, you know, then Andre went on to start Uptown, and Lior moved into the office and did Rush Management. And then Rick left, so Lior went and ran Def Jam, which they did for years, and became a part owner of Def Jam. And then they, you know, sold pieces of it throughout the years to Polygram and then Universal. And eventually I'm back in LA and managing again. And the first time I asked my brother for a job, because he was obviously much more successful in this game than I was, and I wanted to actually, I mean, I loved the music, and, you know, I was making a few bucks here or there, but I wanted to make a living, you know, like, and actually like get a paycheck. So eventually I guess they lost they didn't have like what we, you know, obviously Def Jam's a major now, but back then it was a little independent label. They had no West Coast offices. they lost their urban local, and at the time they only did urban promotion. All the rest of it was left to CBS and Columbia, their partners.
So for the people that are watching, they probably don't know what that means. What do you mean by urban local?
It's radio promotion is the focus, though, you know, especially then radio was mostly the difference between a hit and not a hit.
Right.
Like that's the way you hit a big audience. Like you could do your little shows on the corner, but until you got on the radio, you're not doing more than 500 seats. You know, you're not. Now there's internet, there's TikTok, there's a bunch of other outlets, but back then, you know, that was kind of the holy grail. You know, later MTV started, but so yeah, I was the urban local radio promotion. And with the bigger companies, local meant you did a small region, but since we were a little company, local meant from Seattle to San Diego and like out to Denver. So I had basically the western third of the United States.
Right.
And again, because we were a little independent label, I did everything. You know, we didn't have a retail person, so I went into record stores and put up posters, and we didn't have a local video person, so any of the local video stations or college radio stations or anything, I dealt with them too. But my brother didn't like the whole imaging of the nepotism thing, so I actually took a pay cut from being a manager and waiting tables on the weekend to work for Def Jam. Was making no money. And eventually, obviously, worked my way up and begged for raises. And they were like, the bosses in between me and my brother were like, yeah, I was wondering why he was paying you like less than half of what he's paying everybody else. And I'm like, fucker. But whatever. The way I made it work, and it made it okay for me, was I didn't know much about how a real label ran. I had done my own stuff, but you know, with the different departments and this and that, so I considered it a scholarship. I got paid a small stipend to get an education, and I did. I got, you know, I learned a lot about the business and the workings of radio and promotion and marketing, and so you know, we did well. We had Public Enemy, we had, you know, Third Base, we had, you know, early Jay-Z, Method Man, Redman, you know, Montel Jordan, This Is How We Do It, Cisco's Thong Song. We had, you know, Def Jam in the 90s was on fire. And was still, you know, an independent label. You know, in the beginning, I worked out of my house, you know, like I had vinyl shipped and put it in my garage and had to go to like a FedEx office or UPS store to ship it out to DJs. And you know,
time. You're totally prepared for what's going on right now,
huh? Yeah, thank God now we can digitally send stuff, you know. Or no, we would have been in trouble in this time if it were a physical sales world. But so yeah, I did that, and I did that actually only in the first go round about 2.5 years, because I was still managing my brother's band on the side, who again, you know, had kind of worked its way up the ranks and now was selling out all the clubs in LA, and we had done our first tour and everybody loved us on tour, and we're like, next time you come back, you could headline, you could, you know, you could probably make $300 instead of $100, you know. So I got promoted sort of by accident. I mean, I was aggressive because at the time urban radio was a little. I'm frozen, by the way, with my mouth open, looking silly.
Yeah, I can still hear you, but for some reason you're frozen.
My visual. I wonder if there's anything I can do here. Anyway,
there's a little chat for this system, so let me see if I can do something. But just go ahead, because we can still hear you. So
okay. So anyway, I started working more than just the urban radio stations because at the time, rap music was very polarizing at radio. And even a lot of urban stations wouldn't play rap records. They were playing Peabo Bryson and Luther Vandross and Anita Baker, and R&B was black music, was urban music.
Right.
Hip hop was still like kids music, and people, were offended. Some radio station had more hits and no rap, was
I
their
remember
slogan.
that. I remember
So the stations that were actually breaking rap records were called turbines, or what ended up becoming the format I work now, rhythm. This format in between urban and pop.
So, it was CHR when I was contemporary hit rhythmic. Yeah.
Right. Well, contemporary hit radio, CHR was pop.
Gotcha.
And so, we were supposed to let Columbia do all that stuff for us. But Camiel in San Francisco, even though it was a mainstream record, was playing rap music, and KSOL, which was the urban, wasn't. So I'm like, how am I not going to call the guy who could play my records,
right,
and just keep bugging the guy who keeps telling me no?
Right.
And there was Power 106 in LA, which at the time was playing like half dance music, but also playing was also playing hip hop, and Z90 in San Diego and Q106 in San Diego. So there were a handful of stations, and there were really 3 of them in the country that were really forward thinking and breaking records. Camiel in San Francisco, The Box in Houston, and WPGC in your hometown in DC.
My old job.
Yeah. So if you could get on those 3 stations, and everybody else would go, oh shit, maybe this is something. And then it would start spreading.
Right.
So I started just attacking the stations that could play my stuff. And my bosses got really excited because Columbia at the time was the biggest label in the world. And, they had all these massive, like I said, like Luther Vandross and those type of guys. So my Public Enemy or LL Cool J record was 3rd or 4th down the list when they went into a station. And I wanted it to be, top. So I started talking to them, and like I said, my bosses got excited because we were getting more airplay and more direct connection. We didn't have to have it filtered through Columbia. So they promoted me to national Turbine, but they didn't hire somebody to replace me as the West Coast local. So now I'm still doing all that, putting up posters.
More work, bigger title, same money, probably, I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean, I was getting a little more money by this point, but it was still small money.
Right.
So I took the chance and I quit, and I gave them a lot of notice. I said, look, hire somebody else. I'll train them. I'm not going to leave you hanging. Like, I love everybody here, but I'm going to take a shot with the band that I have equity in, that I'm managing, and we want to put out a record and tour and all that. And so I left Def Jam finally, like 3 months later, because they finally, they weren't hiring anybody because I was still doing the job. So eventually I said, okay, end of the month, I'm out, like 30 days. Like, it's been 3 months, you haven't done anything.
Right.
I'm going to go. And we did that album cycle, and we sold some records, and we were building a base, but there was some infighting within the band, and all that. And the connection back to the Go-Go, actually the intro on, because that album we did then in the mid 90s was half live, and the intro had a very Go-Go sound to it, actually. And my boss at the time from Def Jam was from DC, and a huge Go-Go head. And when I played him the record, he's like, that's fucking Go-Go. Like, because we had the horn section, and it had that groovy feel, and like, it was like, wow, okay. We didn't really know it was, but cool.
Right, right.
And I think that might have been part of what got me to start listening more to other go-go. Um, and so that was going on, and I worked for a couple years. We did the album cycle. Like I said, there was infighting in the band, and Def Jam at that point, while I was gone, sold half the company to Polygram. So got a big influx in cash. Because even when I got more up to scale, we weren't getting paid like major labels were getting paid.
Right.
And so they said, look, we have money, we have backing, we have an office in West Hollywood, and they offered me a job back a little more than double what I was making when I left 2 years before.
Oh, wow. Was that the one on Sunset over top of the Hustler store?
It was actually right across the street from that. The first couple of years we were across the street, and then we moved across to we were right next to the Roxy, actually.
Okay.
Big pink building. And then I came back because that had been I got married in the interim. My wife was pregnant. I'm like, wow, okay, it'd be nice to have health insurance and a steady check. And now it's like a real check. That was one of the reasons it was easy to walk away the first time, was I wasn't walking away from much money. Like they were still paying me crappy. So I came back right into, 95, and This Is How We Do It, and some other big records in the end of the 90s at Def Jam, and I was there about another 10 years and had a great run. What's that?
I said, which is when we met during that time.
Yep. And then they sold, the other half of Def Jam during my second run there. But my brother stayed on and managed it, and most of the people, were the same people, at least higher ups. And, people were moving up in the ranks. Julie Greenwald and Mike Kaiser and Kevin Lyles. And then my brother left after his contract was up. They usually, when you sell a big company, they want the person who's running it to stay on for a few years, so there's a good transition.
Earn out. Yeah.
But that was over. And so he went on to run Warner Music Group, and I stayed at Def Jam for almost another year. And I got fired actually while I was on the road with Method Man.
Oh, really?
L.A. Reid was the new boss, and he came in like all the bosses do and said,
"Clean house,
iconic company. We're not going to change a thing. Def Jam is legendary. I just want to add my." Promptly cleaned house, fired just about 95% of the people there. And it became Arista, sort of, with, some of the Def Jam artists who were still there. But yeah, a whole different company. And then I took some time off, and I got paid out like 7 months. So I was doing independent stuff and whatever. And then they were starting a new division over at Atlantic called Special Ops, because they had just done a deal with Diddy for Bad Boy, and he wanted like his own promotion staff.
Yep.
So that was a hard run. Diddy is a hard man to work with.
Yeah.
And he didn't have enough product coming out of Bad Boy to handle everything. So we also started working other Atlantic records, and, to keep us busy. And we would do feeder stuff that was big and pop, like Danity Kane, which came from Bad Boy, and Making the Band would upstream to Atlantic pop, if it got big enough. And so that was another, moment like this. Is it was a huge downturn in the music business, a big shakeup. And when I, was looking for a gig to come back in after getting let go at Def Jam, it was a hard time. Music business was suffering. And so they offered me exactly half of what I was making when I left Def Jam.
Oh, wow.
And I had to kind of swallow my pride. I saw another friend of mine who got out and didn't get back in, and the business changes quickly, and I realized if I didn't get back in, I might never get back in.
Mm-hmm.
And it's always easier to work from inside than it is from outside. So I did that, and again, worked my way up. And when business got a little better, I kicked and screamed and asked for more money. And, I finally caught up to where I was and surpassed where I was at Def Jam. And somewhere in there got promoted to vice president. And, we've had a really good run from, young jock. It's going down in the special ops days, and then internal shifts working for John Boulos and the Roadrunner promotion staff after the special ops division got wiped out, and then more recently Elektra broke off and my staff went there, so I became part of the urban division but doing rhythm, and that was a little over a year ago. And first real record I worked from that was A Boogie Look Back at It, which we took #1 without really a full staff set up. And, now we have Roddy Ricch, who's running the world. The Box was, 11 weeks #1 at Hot 100. And we're making our push right now for his follow-up, High Fashion, to go #1. We have an amazing kid named Jack Harlow out of Louisville, Kentucky, who's streaming like 11 million streams a week and Shazamming. And we're about to take him into the top 10 at Rhythm, and feels really good. So you keep it moving and, keep doing what I do.
So what does a typical day look like in the life of a radio promotions guy?
A lot of reaching out to radio, whether it's emails, phone calls, texts, however that guy wants to communicate. But it's, pitching our records is the primary focus. And, when it's a new record, we'll send out a blast and, maybe a couple versions, maybe an instrumental. And then giving them any statistics, everything, now there's a lot of data in the world.
Mm-hmm.
So giving them, research information from like-minded stations or streaming numbers nationally and locally, Shazam numbers, all the different ways you can, convince somebody that this record's bubbling, that something's good about it, not just them listening to it and saying, oh, I like this record,
Mm-hmm.
and talking about, Jack Harlow's really charismatic and charming. So he's doing a bunch of, IG lives and, happy hours right after we do this. I'm doing with one of the big radio groups, I'm doing a thing with some of their syndicated people and a few of their stations, and Jack will get on and say hi to the winners from the various stations and talk to the DJs. So I'm also, as well as just pitching the program directors and music directors with new music and trying to convince them why statistically they should be playing my record instead of Columbia's or Capitol's or whoever else's. We're also just the middleman. When they have, not right now, but when they have a summer jam or a Christmas concert, they would call us because we can get them a better deal. Or contesting, when you hear contests on the radio that say, if you're the 10th caller, you can qualify to win a trip to Las Vegas and meet Jack Harlow backstage. we arrange that with the radio station, and we'll pick up the flights and the hotel and arrange a meet and greet for the winners. Or if they're on tour, we might be doing a meet and greet with stations in every market. When you hear about that, when they're giving away tickets to a concert on the radio station and you have a chance to meet the artist, that's me or somebody like me arranging that with the radio station. So anything that has to do with the radio and the label together, I'm kind of the middleman.
Gotcha. So essentially your job is to sell the program directors, at least one part of your job is to sell the program directors on playing the record and why they should be playing the record.
Right. Program directors, music directors, we do have a mix show department, but I still keep in touch with some of the actual DJs who might have a little more freedom to play new music on a Friday night or during the 5 to 6 p.m. traffic jam. So, we sometimes start records there, And
what would you say the percentage of the records that you promote become hits?
I want to give props to our A&R. I think Atlantic has a lot higher average than, maybe some of the other labels. So, if I think back to the last couple of years, I would say 2 out of 3 make it at least to some level. Maybe not a number 1 record, but a top 10 record. And you can muscle some things and with relationships and promotion and whatever, get things a certain level on the chart. But after that, the audience, people have the misconception that labels can make a record a hit if they spend enough money. And that's just not true. Like I had Jay-Z stiffs at Def Jam. We had all the money in the world. He was the biggest star in the world. And it doesn't matter. If the audience doesn't like it, they tell the radio station through some form of research that they don't like it.
Right.
And, they might give you the benefit of the doubt and start the record, but nobody's putting a record into power rotation, playing it every 2 hours, if they're not getting good feedback on it. So it has to connect with the audience. And now it has to stream, it has to Shazam, it has to do all those things. And we can't make it do those things. We can't, muscle it in there. We can get it a shot, but then it's got to connect with the audience. And
the reason I asked that is because and part of the reason that I started this whole series is there's like being, coming from the go-go community and then also having worked in other areas of the industry and radio and in booking. And, I haven't worked at a label, but I had my own independent label with Marble Sauce, and we had a couple of Billboard hits. Billboard, I wouldn't say hits, but
on the chart.
Yeah, on the chart. So there's a very big misconception in the go-go community that the radio doesn't support go-go as much as it should. And the reason I'm pointing this out is because you literally are a full-time employee of a major record label whose only job is to promote the records of your label to the program directors, to the radio stations. And there's a lot of work that goes into that. Obviously you have a staff, even if it was just you, there's a lot of work. There's enough for a full-time person to do that. Right. And still the biggest artist in the world, all the money in the world, you still
doesn't make it work
in rotation. Every record doesn't become a hit. And
no.
So there seems to be this mentality in go-go that because WPGC and WKYS are local stations, that they have some obligation to play go-go all the time, and they don't. They have an obligation to play the records that, just like you said, their
audience wants to hear.
Yeah. And so if you're not making records that the audience wants to hear, then it's not the radio station's job to fix that for you. So again, like the reason for this whole thing is to try to get some of the real information out about how the industry really works, because I want to try to connect the dots between, between the way the go-go industry works and the way that the rest of the music industry works. And because it's not the same thing,
Yeah.
So
no. And I mean, I love the anomaly because there's not many other markets where an independent artist can sell out 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 seats like Gogo can do in DC.
Yep.
And I love the music, and I think, to play devil's advocate, we do get a shot. That's what I was saying. Like, Atlantic has relationships and enough muscle and energy that we can get a record started.
Yep.
But ultimately it has to come through. And that might be what Gogo's not getting. In DC is that shot, but you have to build around it like we do from the streets, which I think Gogo does do. And I don't know, if I were programming in DC, I would be playing some of it, at least the biggest ones, and maybe not 24 hours a day, but maybe at night, or at least on the weekends, to see what the reaction is. Do you get that positive feedback? Does the audience want to hear it? Do you get research? Are Go-Go songs Shazamming in DC and Baltimore? And then how far out is that spreading? So hopefully you could get some of those indicators to start it. And those are two big enough stations that I feel like if you could get a record that reacted and tested and was a power record on KYS or PGC, other stations would look. Then you could go, if you had the right people, if you had a staff, if you were on a label, or just, some great chutzpah and drive, maybe you can go down to, Virginia and Maryland and South Carolina and, up to New York and Jersey and Philly and try it out and say, hey, this is fucking getting played 80 times a week in DC and it's testing through the roof. Like, you guys should at least try it.
Yeah, that's what happened with Mambo Sauce. But I was sort of a one-man army, and I was I was the label and the manager and the producer and the.
It's hard.
It
takes a lot of work and a lot of money and all those things. So it's not easy to do. Yeah.
Well, real quick, sorry about the you've been frozen this whole time, but we can hear everything.
No worries.
But the text.
I just wish I didn't look so stupid when I was frozen.
You look fine.
That's okay. I'm a pirate.
They said that you can just. They finally got back to me. They said that you can just go out of the broadcast and then just come back in again, and it won't interrupt the whole entire broadcast, so that everybody that's on can still be on, and you can just come back in, and it should work.
Get back in now, though.
No, I think you're in. It's just because I can hear you still, but now it's just I don't see anything. I don't see your face at all. So we're just taking a quick. Yeah, what's up, Rob? What's up? While I'm waiting for Motti to come back in, what's up, Rob? What's up, Big John? What's up, Brooks? Thank you, guys. If you have any questions, put them in the chat or text them. So hopefully Motti will be back in here soon. Okay, I think we got him. All right, I think we got action now. You're back.
We missed it.
Yeah, looking a little more handsome than last time. Right?
Yeah, I appreciate that. Wish I'd figured it out sooner.
No, it's all good. I didn't know what to do either, because we were having some issues the other day, but I think that with all of these things with Zoom and all of these kind of things, like the volume is so high now that things are just breaking under the strain. So if you were, I'm just gonna put well, actually, let me go here first. What, if any, traits do you see? I mean, I understand you're not an A&R, you're not the one signing the artist. However, you're on the road with them. You spend a lot of time with the artists. What, if any, traits do you see that are common between, the most successful artists? Like, is there any kind of through line that you could say, well, the most successful artists that I see do this?
I mean, I think there's two ways to look at that. There's successful artists right now, and it's just connecting with the kids. It's still young people who are the biggest consumers. But long term, like the people I've worked with that had careers, not just hits, work ethic. Like they get out there and they work hard in the studio, but they work hard at radio and doing shows and promoting themselves. Because there's, I won't name them, but we have a couple artists now that don't want to do the work, and they'll be around while they have hits, but they won't when the hit is kind of a medium thing, and then it's hard to get back in because they don't have friends, they don't have people who don't want them to win,
Right. Well, so if you can you break down, because I think people say work ethic, but what does that really mean? Like tangibly, what does that mean? What do you see in artists that that you classify as having a work ethic versus one that doesn't? Like, what do they do?
Doing all the interviews, like whether it's interviews for me, the radio things, or press stuff, taking the time before or after their shows to meet their fans, sign autographs, shake hands, kiss babies. And yeah, there's a lot. The video department, the digital department, my department, all want these artists to do things for our clients. And some of them do them and some don't. And they think that's cool, or they're underground or whatever, but that'll go away and people won't care. I mean, hey, I will name names with one from way back when, because he's been gone. DMX was a superstar, just hard to work with. And he didn't want to do the interviews. He didn't want to show up for MTV or any of the radio stations. And the minute he didn't have a hit record, like a smash, he went away. And we haven't heard from him in 15 years.
You know what's funny? I literally I think I've told this story a couple of times on this interview series, that I contrast two different artists. Yesterday I was speaking to a friend of mine who's a school teacher, a music teacher in Oregon, and I was speaking to his class, and I told them this story. And then after I told it, I was like, none of these kids probably even know who either one of these artists are. But I contrasted Lionel Richie with DMX. And Lionel Richie, because I used to have to go give Donnie Simpson every morning, I used to have to give him his prize sheets to say, these are the prizes that you're giving away. So I would be in there at 6 a.m., 5:30 a.m., something like that, giving Donnie Simpson the prize sheets. And I remember that Lionel Richie showed up for his interview like 20 minutes early with one person. And he was respectful to everybody. As an aside, also LL Cool J, I remember you probably brought him to the station in Vegas, if I remember correctly. And he treated the intern with the exact same respect as he treated the
absolutely.
And that says a lot, and on why people have careers that last over a long time. Now, maybe Lionel Richie hasn't had a big hit in a while, but he's still doing big shit. And I contrast that with DMX, who came to PTC, and I think this may have been after you were, or you probably just weren't. You were on the West Coast, so you didn't come. And he showed up on a tour bus 45 minutes late with like 30 people coming in, causing all kinds of ruckus, like being the cool hip hop guy. And yeah, and I tell that story all the time. Like it's very easy to see the difference between the people that last in the business and the people that don't.
Right, and go on to other business. For me, DMX is an example. Sorry, I'm hearing a big echo, so it's throwing me off a little. But LL Cool J, Jay-Z, Ludacris, just career, all those guys worked. They got it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so.
Is the echo gone now?
Yeah.
Okay,
I don't
cool.
know what you did, but I like it.
You were in there twice because when you tried to log back in, you were in there twice.
I got you. I was feeding back.
Yeah, exactly. So, okay, so the purpose of this obviously is to try to figure out how to, move the go-go thing along, and obviously, there's been 40 years plus of sort of doing it wrong, but we've had a couple of
breakouts, sure.
Yeah, breakouts. I mean, with the to me, when it comes to there's two different sides of it. Obviously, a lot of the struggle with go-go has been figuring out how to record effectively and how to record and put out songs that appeal to people on a broader spectrum. Now, live, I don't think there's any other music in the world that's more dynamic than go-go, which is why people, 300, 400, 500
go to shows.
Come see it 3-4 times a week. And literally it's most of the reason why every time I've moved back to DC from Montana or Vegas or LA or wherever I've lived, it's because you can't get it anywhere else. And it's so addictive, but obviously the recording side has always been a challenge, but even on the recorded side, there have been, your Jill Scotts, your A. Marie's, Beyonce and Jay-Z, Crazy in Love, clearly all go-go records, but not done in a traditional go-go format. So,
well, if you want to do mass appeal like radio records, you can't have a 19-minute groove for one. If you can figure out a way to get it to a 3-minute song. Now, a lot of radio records are 2 minutes. Get it to be a 3.5 minute song that's hooky, that's going to stick in people's head, and repeat that hook, at least 2 or 3 times. So there's some just kind of general logistics of what works with, mass appeal records. And then, finding the right team behind it and putting in the work. But absolutely, the recording thing, what we love about go-go is those long, funky grooves that you can dance to for 10 minutes on one song doesn't work on the radio in the same way.
Right. Well, not even just on the radio, but even on the DSPs, even on, your Spotify's or whatever. So what side of the dog freaking out about?
I don't know. I'm trying to figure that out.
I gotcha. You need to check on it real quick, or?
No, it's all right.
Okay, gotcha.
I think we're probably pretty close to wrapping up here anyway.
Yeah. So just a couple more questions. So if you, like say you've obviously been a manager before, booked shows, worked records, worked in labels. If you were to be the manager of a go-go artist or band or whatever at this point, what would your first steps be? What would you do differently? I mean, I know you're not like in the go-go community to know what go-go bands do.
I would say keep doing what you're doing in bringing out live fans when you can. I would say make a shorter, hookier song that you can promote, and then do the work. Go travel with it, even if it's hard on I've seen this with a lot of artists. It's hard on the ego when you can do 3,000 seats in DC and make 20 grand to have to go down to Wilmington, Delaware and make $500 and play to 300 people. But then while you're there, go, visit the radio station, go visit, some other cultural locations, and, make fans other places, spread what you got in DC to other things. And if you're that good, then next time it won't be 300, it'll be 500, and then it'll be 1,000, and then you can do the same thing in Wilmington that you did in, and then hopefully eventually it's Atlanta and it's Miami and it's LA and it's Seattle, and you can be competitive, you know?
Yep. Yeah. Well, that's yeah, that's a lot of the difficulty that bands have, you know, in making these things work, is they somehow in the history of go-go there has been this myth passed down that if you are a band and you play out of town.
Can you hold on 1 second? I do have to deal with this.
No problem. Do you think? Guys, if you have any questions for Motti, I see a lot of people are. Okay, here you go. Brooks has a question. I'll answer that, or I'll ask him that. But yeah, if you have questions, put them in the chat. You can also text them to 202-410-4843. But
we averted disaster.
Or is it about to be a dog fight or something?
No.
Gotcha.
We want to make sure Cy treats the friends well, not like the delivery men, you know?
Gotcha. Sounds good. So, I was just speaking on the difficulty of the fact that there's somehow been passed down this mythology that as soon as you step outside of the DC area, you're supposed to be paid more money, because obviously it costs money to travel, etc. And
it's the opposite. It's you know, and you know, hopefully some of the go-go bands remember their first shows, even in DC. They didn't. It's called paying dues. You know, you gotta understand the mechanics and the financials of it. You know, if you bring 1,000 people and they each pay $10 to get in the spot, then you made $10,000, which now has to be split up and security paid for and everything else. So if you can do those numbers in DC, but you can't do them in Wilmington, you can't make the same money.
Right.
And the club owner doesn't care that you have to rent a bus or, you know, pay for gas or hotel. That's, you know, he's looking at the economies of, if I sell $10,000 worth of tickets and it costs me, you know, $5,000 to put on the show, then I'll give the band $2,000 and then I can pay my staff and make $1,000 for me.
Right.
You know, and, you know, the math doesn't work otherwise. If he's like, I got to pay my staff and and then there's no money left for me, why am I paying the band $3,000? Why am I doing this?
Right. Exactly. Well, there just seems to be a very, you know, there's really this, and I mean, everything you said is perfectly logical. But there just seems to be this disconnect within the community that people think that they get paid for, you know, paid for playing music versus being paid for selling tickets. And
that's a misconception. Like, it's a nice idea, and if you're a studio musician, you can do that. But then again, you got to find your audience. Is there somebody willing to pay you scale to come in the studio?
Yep.
You know, and is there enough people who are going to pay to see you live wherever it is to pay all the bills and to split that money up between the doorman and the security guy and the bartender and the insurance for the venue and all the, you know, advertising and everything else.
Yep. We have I'm gonna let you go here, but we have a question from my buddy Brooks, who is played in a bounce beat go-go band, but also is an amazing guitar player and into sort of the progressive metal, progressive you know, jazz fusion kind of music. And he wanted to know if you thought go-go could work in the progressive, more technical playing scene. I'm not sure how much you're into that scene, but
yeah, I don't know. I mean, I personally love go-go, so I'd love to see the influence more places. You know, I think it makes people move, you know, makes people shake their ass. So that's always a good thing, you know.
Cheat code when you play it live, for sure, that beat. Well, anything else that you want to, that you want to talk about that you're working on or anything like that right now that you want to let anybody know?
No, right now it's Roddy Rich, it's Jack Harlow, it's A Boogie, you know. We got lots of good stuff. Wiz has a great new EP out
Nice.
that I think is the best thing he's done in a long time. So check out Wiz Khalifa's new project. And no, I mean, life is good. Ready to get out and shake my ass a little too. So hopefully this quarantine will be over and I can come back and visit DC.
Indeed.
I'll call you to see where the shows are, like I always
last
do.
time you were in town, you went to see Backyard at Lucky Strike. That was pretty
cool. It was amazing.
Yeah. Cool, man. Well, thanks so much. We'll talk soon, and hopefully we can get another lunch here pretty soon.
Sounds good. Take care.
Thanks, Motti. Appreciate it, man. Thanks, everybody, for checking that out. Tomorrow we have Brian Mills from Secret Society. If you can please do me a favor. I don't know. I think this may be messed up now because I think the subscribe button and the bell icon are next to each other now, but they used to be the other way around. So I'll fix that. But if you could please just subscribe to the channel, click the little bell icon. We got a lot of good stuff coming up. Please share these. They almost immediately hit on the GOGOTIX YouTube page, which is youtube.com/GOGOTIX. This information I really wanted to get out to the go-go community so we can really start working on trying to, create some more upward mobility for our genre and our music. And thank you to everybody for tuning in and the questions and comments. And we'll talk to you soon. Thanks so much.